The Beatles rose from their humble beginnings in Liverpool, England, to become international superstars as Beatlemania swept the world in 1964. Generations later, we're still feeling the positive ripple effects from the Beatles breaking that barrier, coming to America, and bringing their music with them. They ignited the first but also largest fandom known to humankind, as technology allowed other countries to be in on the secret for the first time, as the Beatles' live performances gave fans an opportunity for a new kind of connection, a closer one with the artist, and one that blazed the trail for the brand new touring concert industry. To celebrate the release of the Beatles' 1964 US Albums in Mono box set, which I'll be unboxing throughout this video, I wanted to break down 10 of the Beatles' most iconic performances, whether that be one-off gigs or a certain era, a residency. I wanted to break down the iconic moments that made them who they were. We'll go in chronological order from the mop tops to the rooftops, with a whole lot of rich Beatles history in between. Hey neighbor, welcome back to the channel. My name is John, not Lennon, and today I'm excited to be talking about the Beatles again, and hopefully, knock on wood, next year, I'll be talking about them even more. Also, if you want to pick up the 8 LP Beatles in Mono box set, there's a link in the description down below. You can grab one while they're still available, and thank you to Team Beatles for being kind enough to send this out to me and for inspiring this video. The Casbah Coffee Club. The Casbah Coffee Club was truly for the OG Beatles fans, because fans would not have known them as the Beatles, but the Quarrymen in that era. The Beatles played more than 40 shows at the Casbah Coffee Club between 1959 to 1962, but what's even wilder is that the venue was owned by Mona Best, who was the mother of, at the time, Beatles drummer Pete Best. It's also notable that Mona would paint stars on the ceiling of her venue, yet Ringo Starr wasn't in the Beatles yet. It's funny how these things work themselves out. The Cavern Club. With over 290 live performances at the Cavern Club between 1961 to 1963 in Liverpool, the Beatles were truly cutting their teeth and honing their craft as a live band. Their first performance was a lunchtime show on February 9th, 1961, with those lunchtime shows going on to often draw factory workers and other gig workers who would stop in, and it eventually started to pack in younger fans as well. Their future manager Brian Epstein discovered the Beatles at the Cavern Club as they were playing a show here on November 9th, 1961. We need to understand that the Beatles were very much still a local band at this time. They had not gone international, nor were they that popular outside of Liverpool, and Paul McCartney would often get very frustrated with the requests that he would get to cover certain songs, especially the German standard My Bonnie. My bonnie lies over the ocean, my bonnie lies over the sea. I could see how that would get old, Sir Paul. Their final show at the Cavern Club was August 3rd, 1963, officially marking the end of the fairly local era as they shifted towards Beatlemania. The Star Club. There is one other really important club that we have to visit before we can get into the Beatlemania years, because it was the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany. You see, the performances in the UK were one thing, but they were definitely a little bit more in line and controlled. The Star Club is where the Beatles went when they were amped up and going off the rails, sometimes playing marathon concerts in Germany for more than 8 hours at a time. This is the club where early raw recordings of tracks like Twist and Shout really captured the intensity of that pre-fame Beatles sound. Of course, they were still doing cover songs and other standards at this time, slowly working in some original material and becoming the songwriting duo of Lennon and McCartney that we would all come to expect. Hamburg was very important for the Beatles in the sense that it sharpened them as live musicians and made them so much better at their craft before they became global superstars. Now we can move into the Beatlemania years, where the craze went absolutely bonkers, and that's where most of the albums in this box set come in handy, so let's start getting into those. And here it is in all of its weighted glory, the Beatles' 1964 US albums in mono. This 8 LP set comes with Meet the Beatles' second album, A Hard Day's Night, Something New, The Beatles' Story, which is a 2-disc exclusive to this box set, Beatles 65, and finally, the early Beatles compilation. Here we go. This is a beautiful box set. It's 8 LPs total. I like the way that this is set up too. It almost looks like a little bookend or something. The Royal Variety Performance. Private concerts for the rich have always been a thing. Just ask the Beatles, who played a show for the royal family where John Lennon delivered this famous line.
The people in the cheaper seats, clap your hands. And the rest of you, if you just rattle your jewelry.
John Lennon was never afraid to get cheeky with that, and that really helped cement his likable status with older audiences, and it made them more okay. It's like, oh, fine, my granddaughter's listening to the Beatles. They can't be that bad. They seem like good boys. I could just pinch their cheeks. At this intimate gig, they performed From Me to You, She Loves You, Till There Was You, and Twist and Shout. Okay, I may have lied. There were some cameras in the room filming the entire thing. It was broadcast to millions across the UK, cementing their status as budding icons there, but it hadn't broken across the pond in the States yet. The Ed Sullivan Show. What an absolutely historic moment. In fact, the Ed Sullivan Show might just be the most iconic performance on this entire list. With this unforgettable performance aired in black and white, they opened with the song All My Loving and finished with I Want to Hold Your Hand. Apparently, a stagehand had accidentally stepped on George Harrison's guitar, damaging it before the show to the point where he didn't know if he was going to have something to perform with. I'll never forget my parents, my mom in particular, telling me with just this glow in her eyes, knowing that she was there for this. She was born in 1955, so she was alive and well in 1964 when the Beatles debuted on Ed Sullivan. It was a connective tissue for Americans. They bonded over their love for the Beatles, and overnight, they were sensations to the point where security guards had to line the walls of their hotel in New York City. Mind you, this was immediately following the Ed Sullivan Show performance, and people only got like 3 channels on their TV back in the day, and now everybody in the vicinity is making a beeline for the Beatles. It's important to note that more than 73 million people tuned in for this, meaning America was officially set ablaze with Beatlemania. Washington Coliseum. Just 2 days after they appeared on Ed Sullivan, they had their first ever official U.S. concert at the Washington Coliseum. A crowd of 8,000 were witness to the raw energy and the rotating stage that gave the Beatles the unforgettable visuals that stayed with American fans for generations. Now, the band were having to spin their amps manually to have to see all of the different parts of the crowd, but it kind of worked out and kind of didn't, because in one angle they were getting hit by jelly beans after the iconic inside joke, kind of an if you know, you know type of thing. There was a misquote in a magazine that led to jelly beans being thrown at George, Ringo, Paul, and John, and they didn't like that very much.
The jelly beans are a bit dangerous, traveling about 50 miles an hour through the air. If it hits you in the eye, well, you're finished.
I'm still really impressed with how they pulled off this stage setup, and knowing that logistics couldn't have been good for security and safety, it's impressive that they pulled it off in the sea of screaming fans. The Beatles at Shea Stadium. Just saying Shea Stadium gives a smile to a Beatles fan. They know that you're about to have a good discussion, and how can you not when you talk about one of the most iconic rock shows ever?
Ladies and gentlemen, they will be here soon. They're ready for you. Are you ready for them? I bet you are.
In fact, this was the first ever stadium rock concert in history that was attended by more than 55,000 Beatles fans. At one point, the crowd noise went up to more than 131 decibels. It was louder than a jet engine, and it was pretty much impossible for any of the Beatles to hear each other. and for any of the police or their staff on stage to really do much about anything. I know there's photos, but I don't know if there's videos of the police officer that was just standing on stage looking hypnotized by everything that was going on around him. Like, he wasn't gonna arrest anybody, he just needed to witness the Beatles live in concert. The Hollywood Bowl performances. Overwhelming crowd noise became synonymous with Beatlemania, and the Hollywood Bowl performances in August of 1964 and August of 1965 were definitely showing those symptoms more than ever. George Harrison once called the venue a giant Hollywood party, which might explain how he convinced the Beatles to play it again. After 1964, they were definitely mobbed by fans. It was almost impossible to hear each other the whole 9 yards, but they came back for not just one, but 2 shows the following August. They ended up remastering these shows later on and releasing them in 1977 as The Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl, which is one of their best-selling live sets ever.
The final show at Candlestick Park.
Candlestick Park is a bit of a sad show because it marked the end of the Beatles as a touring machine. Fans were quick to notice that Paul McCartney was taking photos from the stage, and he said later that he sensed that this was going to be the Beatles' final tour, and his third eye predicted that one correctly. The final show of their final tour had a set list that included tracks like Long Tall Sally and Nowhere Man, but the band only allotted that 25,000 of the 42,000 seat stadium be sold. Most see this as a sign that the Beatles were genuinely fatigued and burnt out on touring. It was not something that they enjoyed, and they didn't exactly keep that a secret. So I think if we're talking about iconic Beatles performances, it's worth noting that the band weren't exactly into it, nor do I blame them without the invention of in-ear monitors. Apple Rooftop Concert. Finally, because of course we're going to talk about it, the Apple Corporation Rooftop performance in 1969.
Don't let me down.
This impromptu performance is well documented in The Beatles Get Back. It was a really good watch on Disney Plus a few years back, but of course this performance didn't come without some setbacks, including the fact that the cops shut it down after just 42 minutes because of noise complaints. Why would the Beatles be getting noise complaints? I don't know, it's almost like they could draw a crowd at the drop of a pen. It was dangerously cold up on that rooftop. They really didn't put a ton of thought into it. In fact, you can see Ringo Starr wearing his wife Maureen's red raincoat to really fight off that cold weather. The Apple Rooftop concert featured live takes of Get Back, Don't Let Me Down, and I've Got a Feeling, some of which the band played multiple times as they really tried to hone the sound. The energy in the streets and on that rooftop is palpable, even just as the viewer from across the screen, so I can only imagine what it would have been like to have been there on that day. I hope you enjoyed this chronological journey through the Beatles' most iconic live performances. Let me know your favorites in the comments section down below, along with any details that you find interesting that I might have missed. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe on your way out if you're new to the channel, and check out the Beatles box set linked in the description down below if you want to get a set for yourself.